Mom spent $230K on my sister's wedding, but refused $85K to save my son. Karma found her. I still remember the brochure for the venue sitting on her polished coffee table. It was a vineyard in Napa Valley, the kind you see in movies, with rolling green hills and a century-old oak tree for the ceremony. My sister Ashley wanted a fairy tale, and my mother Carol was determined to give it to her. She talked endlessly about the $15,000 designer dress, the French champagne fountain, and the celebrity florist being flown in from New York. Every detail was a testament to how much she loved her perfect daughter. While she was picking out color swatches for Ashley's big day, I was sitting in a sterile doctor's office, listening to a specialist explain that my 5-year-old son, Leo, needed a specialized surgery to correct a rare heart condition. The cost was $85,000, and my insurance wouldn't cover the full amount. My mom spent $230K on my sister's wedding, but refused $85K for my son's surgery. I still remember the brochure for the Napa Vineyard venue. Subscribe and leave a like to see karma's revenge. I went to my mother's house that evening, my hands shaking as I held the medical papers. She was on the phone, laughing with Ashley about the ice sculpture they had just ordered. When she finally hung up, she barely looked at me. "Laura, what is it? I'm in the middle of planning." I explained everything, my voice cracking as I described the risks if Leo didn't get the surgery. I showed her the bill, the terrifying number printed in bold black ink. She glanced at it, her expression turning from mild irritation to cold dismissal. $85,000? She said, as if I'd asked for $1 million. "Laura, you know all my savings are tied up in the wedding. This is Ashley's moment. We can't just pull funds for this." I stared at her, speechless. "Tied up? Mom, you just spent more than that on the catering alone. This is for Leo, your grandson." She sighed, a long, dramatic sound. "He'll be fine. Kids are resilient. Besides, it's your responsibility, not mine. You should have saved more." The cruelty of her words felt like a physical blow. It wasn't just a no. It was a complete invalidation of my son's life in favor of my sister's party. Ashley, who had been listening from the other room, walked in with a smug smile. "Laura, don't be so dramatic. Mom's right. You can't expect her to sacrifice my happiness for every little problem you have. My little problem, my son's heart." I felt the floor drop out from under me. I looked from my mother's indifferent face to my sister's triumphant one and understood. I was not part of this family. I was an outsider, a burden they tolerated. I walked out of that house without another word, the sound of their laughter echoing behind me. That night, I cried until I had no tears left, holding my sleeping son and promising him I would find a way. My father, Arthur, had passed away a few years earlier, leaving my mother a substantial inheritance that she was now burning through for Ashley. He was the one who always saw me, who believed in me. I remembered something he used to tell me when I was a child, whenever I felt overlooked. He'd sit me on his lap and say, "Laura, my girl, the most valuable things are often hidden in plain sight." At the time, I thought he was talking about finding pretty rocks on the beach or discovering a hidden bird's nest. But as I sat there in my tiny apartment, the weight of the world on my shoulders, his words took on a new meaning. I knew he wasn't just talking about rocks. The next few weeks were a blur of desperation. I sold my car, a reliable but old Honda Civic. I sold the jewelry my father had given me, each piece a painful memory of a love I no longer had access to. I took on extra shifts at the diner where I worked, my feet aching and my body running on caffeine and fear. Every dollar I scraped together felt like a victory, but I was nowhere near the $85,000 I needed. My mother and Ashley never called. I saw pictures of the bachelorette party in Las Vegas on social media, my sister posing with champagne in a luxury suite. They were living in a different universe, one where my son's life was worth less than a weekend of fun. One rainy afternoon, I was cleaning out the small storage closet in my apartment, looking for anything else I could sell. In the back, tucked under some old blankets, was a worn leather box. It was my father's old document box, the one he kept all his important papers in. My mom had given it to me after he died, saying it was just old work stuff, and she didn't have room for it. I had never opened it, too consumed by grief at the time. My fingers traced the faded initials, A for Arthur Evans. With a heavy heart, I lifted the lid. Inside, it was filled with old files, blueprints, and property deeds. Most of it looked like jargon I didn't understand. I started to close it, feeling another wave of hopelessness wash over me. But then, a small folded piece of paper tucked into a side pocket caught my eye. It was a deed to a small plot of land, with a handwritten note from my father attached. My hands trembled as I read his familiar script. I had no idea that this dusty old box held the key to everything. It was the first step toward justice, and the beginning of the end for my mother and sister. The note was attached to the deed with a rusty paperclip. His handwriting, a familiar slanted cursive, was a ghost from a happier time. "Laura, my girl," it began, and a lump formed in my throat. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're in a tough spot. I'm sorry I'm not there to help you through it. Remember what I always told you. The most valuable things are often hidden in plain sight. This little piece of nothing might look like just that. Nothing. But it's a key. Don't sell it for the first price you're offered. Find out what lock it opens. I love you. Dad." My tears smudged the ink on the old paper. A key to what? I unfolded the deed. It was for a 5-acre plot of land in a county I'd never even heard of, somewhere out in the desert. The legal description was a mess of numbers and letters, meaningless to me. The purchase date was over 20 years ago. My father had been holding on to this for decades. I spent the next few hours at my small kitchen table, my laptop open, Leo sleeping soundly in the next room. I typed the property number into the county assessor's website. The result was underwhelming. The land was valued at a mere $5,000. It was zoned for agricultural use, but the satellite images just showed a flat expanse of brown dirt and scrub brush. There were no roads leading to it, no utilities, nothing. It was, as my father wrote, a piece of nothing. Disappointment washed over me. Was this it? Was this his grand secret? $5,000 wouldn't even cover the down payment for Leo's surgery. I felt foolish for getting my hopes up, but his words echoed in my mind. Find out what lock it opens. He wouldn't have kept this for so long, written that note, if it was only worth a few $1,000s. There had to be more. I looked back at the box. It was full of his old architectural firm's files. Blueprints for buildings I didn't recognize, contracts, zoning applications. My father had been a commercial architect, a good one. He designed shopping centers and office parks. Maybe the clue wasn't in the deed itself, but in these other papers. I started going through them, one by one. It was slow, tedious work. Most of it was technical jargon. But then I found a file labeled High Desert Development Project. Inside were plans for a massive luxury resort and golf course. The blueprints were intricate, showing a sprawling complex of hotels, man-made lakes, and an 18-hole championship course. It was ambitious, the kind of project that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. As I studied the master plan, my heart started to pound. A small, square-shaped piece of land was marked right in the middle of the proposed golf course, colored in red with the words, "Parcel pending acquisition." I pulled out the deed again and compared the parcel numbers. They were a perfect match. My father's land was a 5-acre hole in the middle of a billion-dollar dream. He hadn't bought a piece of nothing. He had bought a roadblock. I didn't know the legalities, but I knew this was significant. I needed a lawyer, someone who could understand what I was looking at. My father had an old partner, a man named Thomas, who had handled all his legal affairs. I found his number in an old address book. I wasn't sure if he was even still practicing, but I had to try. I called the next morning, my voice trembling. An older, calm voice answered. "This is Thomas." I explained who I was, that I was Arthur Evans's daughter. There was a pause on the line. "Arthur's girl," he said, his voice softening. "Of course, I was so sorry to hear about his passing. He was a great man. What can I do for you, Laura?" I brought the box of documents to his office that afternoon. It was an old-fashioned place with wood-paneled walls and the smell of old books. Thomas was a kind-faced man in his late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes. He listened patiently as I told him everything. About Leo, my mother and sister, and the box I had found. He laid the blueprints out on his large mahogany desk, studying them with a practiced eye. He then looked at the deed and my father's note. He read the note twice, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Your father was one of the smartest men I ever knew," he said, looking up at me. "He wasn't just an architect, he was a chess player. He always thought 10 moves ahead." He tapped his finger on the red square on the blueprint. This resort project was the brainchild of a massive corporation. They've been trying to get it off the ground for years, buying up all the surrounding land. Your father knew about their plans long before they went public. He bought this parcel knowing it would be the linchpin for the entire development. He leaned back in his chair. Without this specific 5 acres, they can't build their golf course as designed. It would ruin the entire layout, the flow. Moving it would mean re-engineering everything, costing them millions in delays and new permits. I felt a surge of adrenaline. So, what does that mean for me? Thomas's smile widened. "It means, Laura, that your father didn't leave you a piece of land worth $5,000. He left you a golden ticket. This land isn't valuable for what's on it. It's valuable for who wants it. And they will want it very, very badly." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "They will try to lowball you. They'll threaten you. But we have all the leverage. That corporation is run by a ruthless CEO, but he's about to meet Arthur Evans's daughter." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of real hope. It wasn't just hope for Leo. It was the feeling of power, of holding a key that my mother and sister could never have imagined. My father had left me a weapon, hidden in plain sight. "So, what's our first move?" I asked Thomas, the dusty blueprint still spread across his desk like a treasure map. He folded his hands and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Our first move, Laura, is to do nothing. We wait. They've been working on this project for years. They have timelines, investors, and millions of dollars already sunk into it. Right now, they think your father's parcel is just a minor administrative hurdle, an unclaimed property they can acquire for pennies on the dollar. They'll make the first move, and when they do, they'll reveal their hand." His calmness was contagious. For the first time, I felt like I was on solid ground, not quicksand. He was right. My father had set the board. Now, I just had to wait for my opponent to make their move. The call came 3 days later. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a slick, corporate-sounding man on the other end. His name was Gregory, and he was the head of acquisitions for the development company. His voice was smooth as silk, but there was an undercurrent of impatience to it. He said he'd like to meet about a small land parcel they were interested in. He made it sound like a routine piece of paperwork. I told him he'd have to speak with my legal counsel and gave him Thomas's number. I could almost hear his smile falter over the phone. This wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. Thomas called me an hour later. "They want to meet tomorrow," he said. "At their office. They're trying to intimidate us. We'll go, but we play by our rules." The next day, I dropped Leo off at a friend's house and met Thomas. The corporation's headquarters was a skyscraper of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. It was a world away from my tiny apartment and the diner. We were led into a conference room on the top floor with a panoramic view of the city. Gregory was waiting for us. He was a man in a perfectly tailored suit with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He oozed a kind of expensive confidence that was designed to make other people feel small. He shook my hand, his grip firm and dismissive. "Laura?" he said, as if he was remembering the name of a distant, unimportant relative. "Thank you for coming. And Thomas? It's been a while." Thomas just nodded, his expression unreadable. Gregory launched into a polished presentation about the resort, calling it a vision for the future. He spoke in corporate jargon about synergy and maximizing value, but all I heard was the echo of my mother's voice, prioritizing a party over my son's life. Finally, he got to the point. He pulled up a map on the large screen, the red square of my father's land glowing in the center. "As you can see, we've acquired all the surrounding parcels," he said, gesturing vaguely. "This last little piece is all that's left. A formality, really. Our research shows its assessed value is around $5,000. For the sake of expediency, we're prepared to offer you $20,000. You can sign the papers today and the money will be in your account by morning. He leaned back, smiling, as if he had just offered me the deal of a lifetime. I felt a flash of anger. $20,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover a quarter of Leo's surgery. I looked at Thomas. He gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. That was the signal. I took a deep breath, channeling the calm he had shown me. "Mr. Gregory," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. "I appreciate the offer, but we're not interested in selling at this time." Gregory's smile vanished. It happened so fast, it was like a mask had been ripped off. His eyes turned hard. "I don't think you understand, Laura. This isn't really a negotiation. That land is worthless to anyone but us. 20,000 is more than generous." "Perhaps," Thomas interjected smoothly, before I could say something I'd regret. "But the land isn't for sale." Gregory stared at us, his jaw tight. The friendly corporate executive was gone, replaced by a predator. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and cold. "A big one. We have ways of dealing with these kinds of obstacles. Legal avenues. You could find yourself tied up in court for years, spending money you don't have, only to lose the land anyway. Or you can walk out of here with $20,000. Your choice." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He thought I was just some poor, single mother he could bully into submission. He didn't know about Leo. He didn't know about the promise I'd made to my dying father. And he certainly didn't know that I had nothing left to lose. I stood up, my chair scraping against the polished floor. "I believe we're done here," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "You have my lawyer's number if you have a more serious offer to discuss." We walked out, leaving him sitting alone in his glass tower, his perfect view suddenly spoiled by a 5-acre plot of dirt he couldn't have. As the elevator descended, I felt a surge of power. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. And I was just getting started. Back in Thomas's quiet office, the scent of old paper and leather felt like a sanctuary after the sterile coldness of Gregory's skyscraper. "His threats are a good sign," Thomas said, pouring me a glass of water. "It means he's worried. Bullies only threaten when they feel their power slipping." I took a long drink, my hand still shaking slightly. "So what now? We just wait for him to sue us?" Thomas shook his head, a calm smile on his face. "We wait for him to raise his offer. Significantly, that $20,000 insult was just the opening bid in a game he's just realized he's losing. He'll be back." The next 2 weeks were a strange mix of crippling anxiety and a newfound sense of purpose. Every time I looked at Leo, saw him get out of breath after running for just a few seconds, the fear would grip me. But then I'd remember the look on Gregory's face when we walked out, and a cold resolve would settle in my stomach. I was fighting for my son, and for the first time, I had a real weapon. My mother and Ashley continued to live in their bubble of blissful ignorance. Ashley's social media was a constant stream of wedding updates. A video of her final dress fitting for the $15,000 gown, a picture of the custom-made wedding invitations with gold leaf, a post gushing about the 5-star resort where they'd booked the honeymoon suite. Each post was like a little twist of the knife, a reminder of their priorities. One evening, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from an unknown address, a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line was "Final Notice of Intent to Acquire Property." My heart hammered against my ribs. The email was full of dense legal threats, citing obscure state statutes about public utility and development easements. It was designed to terrify someone like me, someone who couldn't afford a long legal battle. It claimed that if I didn't accept their generous final offer of $25,000, they would begin proceedings to seize the land through eminent domain. It was Gregory's move, a legal scare tactic delivered by his high-priced lawyers. I felt the old panic rising in my throat, the feeling of being small and powerless. I immediately forwarded the email to Thomas. He called me back within 10 minutes. "Breathe, Laura," he said, his voice a steady anchor. "This is exactly what I expected. It's pure bluff. Eminent domain is for public works like highways or schools, not for a private luxury golf course. They have no legal standing and they know it. They're just hoping you don't." He explained that it was a cheap, nasty trick to scare me into settling. They are getting desperate, he added. This is a sign of weakness, not strength. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my small living room, looking at the worn leather box my father had left me. I thought about his words. The most valuable things are often hidden in plain sight. I was starting to understand. The land itself was just dirt. Its real value was the leverage it gave me, the power it gave a single mother to stand up to a billion-dollar corporation and a family who had thrown her away. A week later, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "You're not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I just got off the phone with a very flustered Mr. Gregory. My stomach did a flip. What did he want? He wants to meet again, and he made a new offer over the phone. I held my breath. How much? Thomas paused for dramatic effect. $300,000. I almost dropped the phone. $300,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It would pay for Leo's surgery 3 times over. It would buy us a small house, a new car, a life free from the constant fear of medical bills and overdue rent. It was everything I needed. Laura, are you there? Thomas's voice brought me back to reality. Yes, I whispered. I'm here. It's a serious offer, he said. It's enough to solve your immediate problem, but it's not what the land is worth to them. Not even close. They're still trying to get a bargain. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. $300,000 was a lifeline. It was safety. It was Leo's future, right there for the taking. But then I thought of my mother and Ashley, spending nearly that much on a single day's party, dismissing my son's health as a little problem. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. What do you think we should do? I asked Thomas, my voice barely audible. The choice is yours, Laura, he said gently. But if you ask me, I think we're just getting started. We're just getting started. Thomas's words echoed in my ear long after we hung up. I sat on my worn-out sofa, the one with the spring that always poked my back, and stared at the peeling paint on the wall. $300,000. The number felt unreal, like something from a game show. It was a key that could unlock a different life for me and Leo. A life without the constant, gnawing fear of eviction notices and declined credit cards. I could call the surgeon's office tomorrow and schedule the procedure. I could finally sleep through the night without waking up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding with a terror that mirrored my son's own fragile heartbeat. But then, a different image flooded my mind. My mother, Carol, laughing on the phone with Ashley, discussing a $10,000 ice sculpture for the wedding. My sister's smug smile as she called my son's condition a little problem. They had spent nearly the same amount on a party, on a single day of champagne and designer fabric, that I was now being offered to save my son's future. The thought was like gasoline on a fire I didn't know was still burning inside me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about worth. My mother had put a price tag on her grandson's life, and it was less than the cost of her favorite daughter's wedding cake. I wouldn't let Gregory do the same. I picked up the phone and called Thomas back. My voice was different this time. The tremor was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Reject it, I said, before he could even say hello. Tell him no. There was a moment of silence on the line, and then I heard Thomas let out a low chuckle. I was hoping you'd say that, he said. So, what's our number? I took a deep breath. It's not just a number, Thomas. I want to make a statement. I told him my idea. He listened patiently, and when I was done, he was quiet for a long time. Laura, he said finally, his voice full of something that sounded like pride. Your father would be so proud of you. This is exactly the kind of move he would have made. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. My stomach instantly clenched. She didn't ask about Leo. She never did. Laura, I need you to go online and order the party favors for the rehearsal dinner, she said, her voice brisk and annoyed. The ones Ashley picked out. They're little silver boxes from Tiffany's. I'm sending you the link. I'm just too swamped to handle it. I was stunned into silence. She wanted me to buy party favors that probably cost more than my monthly rent, after refusing to help with my son's surgery. Mom, I can't afford that, I said, my voice flat. She sighed dramatically. Oh, for heaven's sake, Laura, don't be so difficult. It's for your sister. Just put it on a credit card. You can pay it back later. No, I said. The word was small, but it felt like a stone dropping into a deep well. What did you say? She asked, her tone sharp with disbelief. I said no, I repeated, louder this time. I will not be buying party favors. I have other priorities. I thought about my father, about the land, about the power he had secretly passed down to me. I remembered something he used to say when I was little, watching him sketch out blueprints at the kitchen table. A foundation looks like nothing, he'd tell me, until you build a skyscraper on it. My father had given me the foundation. Now it was my turn to build. I have to go, Mom, I said, and I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was the first time I had ever stood up to her. I spent the rest of the day with Leo at the park, pushing him on the swings and watching him laugh. Every smile, every breath he took fueled my resolve. That afternoon, Thomas called Gregory. He told me about it later. He said he let Gregory talk for 5 minutes, let him ramble on about how generous the $300,000 offer was. Then, Thomas calmly interrupted him. My client has considered your offer, Mr. Gregory, he said, and she finds it insufficient. Her counteroffer is $5 million. Thomas said there was a dead silence on the phone, so profound he thought Gregory might have had a heart attack. My mother chose a fairy tale wedding over her grandson's life. What would you do in my place? Comment your thoughts and share this story. $5 million? Gregory finally sputtered, his voice a mix of outrage and disbelief. Is she insane? That's ludicrous. Oh, we're not finished, Thomas continued, his voice as smooth as glass. In addition to the $5 million, your corporation will make a public, televised donation of $250,000 to the pediatric cardiology wing of the City Children's Hospital. You will present the check yourself at a press conference, and you will mention that it's in honor of a brave little boy named Leo. Thomas said the sound Gregory made was something between a gasp and a choke. He had wanted to play hardball. He had no idea what kind of game he was in now. This wasn't a corporate negotiation anymore. I had made it personal. The silence from Gregory's end lasted for 3 full days. I spent them in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of life, making Leo's breakfast, reading him bedtime stories, checking his breathing while he slept. But my mind was 1,000 miles away, in a glass tower downtown. I was either a genius or a fool, and I had no idea which. On the 4th morning, Thomas called. Well, he didn't have a heart attack, he said dryly, but he did scream at his legal team for an hour. I have a friend in their firm. Apparently the word unhinged was used. A small cold smile touched my lips. So he's angry. He's apoplectic, Thomas corrected. He told them to find a way to crush you, to bury you in legal fees until you beg to sell for the original $20,000. His exact words were, I will own that dirt if I have to bankrupt that pathetic woman to get it. The threat should have terrified me, but it didn't. It was just noise. A rich man's tantrum. So he's rejecting our offer, I stated. Officially, he hasn't responded at all. He's trying to intimidate us with silence. He wants you to panic, call me, and tell me to take the $300,000, Thomas explained. He thinks you're weak, Laura. He's about to find out how wrong he is. He was wrong, but his next move was one neither of us anticipated. He didn't send lawyers after me. He sent my mother. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen making Leo a sandwich, and my heart jumped thinking it was a process server. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw my mother, Carol, and my sister, Ashley, standing on my worn-out welcome mat. Carol was tapping her foot impatiently, a look of thunder on her face. Ashley was scrolling through her phone, looking bored and annoyed to be there. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide my surprise. Carol pushed past me into my small apartment, her expensive perfume instantly filling the air. Don't you? What are you doing here? Me, Laura, she snapped, her eyes scanning my living room with disdain. We need to talk. Now. Ashley followed her in, wrinkling her nose. This place is so small, she commented. How can you breathe? We were just fine until you two showed up, I said, closing the door. What do you want? My mother spun around to face me, her face flushed with anger. I got a phone call today, Laura, from a very important man, a Mr. Gregory. Does that name ring a bell? My blood went cold. He had gone to her. He had broken every rule of negotiation and gone straight to what he thought was my weak spot. My family. He had no idea they were my wound. He told me the most incredible story, Carol continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm, about how you own some worthless piece of land his company needs, and about how you're trying to extort him for $5 million. $5 million, Laura. Are you out of your mind? Ashley finally looked up from her phone, her eyes wide with greedy disbelief. $5 million? You have something worth $5 million and you didn't tell us? It's not worth $5 million, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It's worth whatever he's willing to pay for it. And this has nothing to do with either of you. My mother let out a sharp, ugly laugh. Nothing to do with us? Nothing to do with us. You're my daughter. Your good fortune is this family's good fortune. Mr. Gregory was very clear. He offered you $300,000, a perfectly reasonable amount, and you turned it down because of your greed. I stared at her. He had twisted the story completely, painting himself as the victim and me as the villain, and she had believed him without a second's hesitation. He needs that land, Laura, Ashley chimed in, suddenly an expert in corporate real estate. It's for some big project. You're holding up progress. And for what? You could have taken that money. That's more than enough for Leo's little issue. The casual cruelty of her words, the way she dismissed my son's life or death situation, made something inside me snap. Get out, I said. What? Carol asked, shocked. Get out of my house, I repeated, my voice rising. Both of you, now. You listen to me, my mother hissed, stepping closer. You will call that man back, and you will accept his generous offer. And when you get that money, you will give me and your sister your fair share for all the trouble you've caused. My fair share? I was shaking now, not with fear, but with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. What is your fair share, Mom? Is it half? Is it more than the $230,000 you're spending on Ashley's party? Tell me, what's the going rate for a grandson's heart? She flinched as if I'd struck her. Don't you dare bring that up. This is different. It is different, I agreed, my voice dropping to a whisper. Because this time I have the power, and you get nothing. You chose your side when you told me my son's life was less important than a champagne fountain, so you can go back to planning your perfect party. But don't you ever come to my door asking for a single cent. You are not my family. I opened the door and pointed outside. For the first time in my life, my mother looked at me and saw not a disappointment, but an enemy. She stared, speechless, before grabbing Ashley's arm and storming out, slamming the door behind her. I leaned against it, my body trembling, and slid to the floor. The foundation my father had left me was holding strong, but the skyscraper I was building on it was shaking. The moment the door slammed shut, the adrenaline that had been holding me together vanished, and my knees gave out. I slid down the cheap wood, my back pressed against it as if to keep them from coming back in. My whole body was trembling, a violent, uncontrollable shiver that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. I could still smell my mother's cloying perfume in the air, a scent I used to associate with comfort, now tainted with betrayal. I pulled my knees to my chest and buried my face in them, taking ragged breaths, trying to muffle the sobs that were tearing their way up my throat. Leo, woken by the shouting, padded out of his room, rubbing his eyes and clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Mommy, are you sad?" he asked, his little voice thick with sleep. I looked up, quickly wiping my eyes. Seeing his worried face was like a jolt of electricity to my heart. I forced a smile. "No, baby. Mommy's not sad. Mommy's just fighting. He didn't understand, but he crawled into my lap and wrapped his small arms around my neck. His warmth was the only thing that felt real in that moment. He was my foundation. The next morning, I called Thomas and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long pause. "He went to your mother," he said, his voice flat and hard. It wasn't a question. "He tried to use your family as a weapon against you." "It almost worked," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. For a second, I just wanted it all to be over. "But it didn't work," Thomas said firmly. "You held your ground, Laura. You have no idea how important that was. Gregory just showed his hand. He's not a negotiator. He's a bully. And bullies only have one move: intimidation. When that fails, they get sloppy." He was right, but I didn't feel strong. I felt exposed, like he had peeled back my skin and found the most sensitive nerve to press. Thomas must have sensed it. "Get some rest," he said gently. He made his move. Now we wait for him to make another, and he will. His next move came 3 days later. It wasn't a lawsuit or a threatening letter. It was an article on the website of a popular local news blogger, the kind of site that specialized in sensationalized business gossip. The headline was brutal. "Greedy daughter holds city's economic future hostage. Risks sick son's health for personal payday." My photo was plastered next to the headline, a candid shot someone must have taken of me in the grocery store, looking tired and stressed. The article was a masterpiece of manipulation. It painted Gregory as a community benefactor, a visionary trying to build a state-of-the-art golf resort that would bring jobs and tourism to the area. I was portrayed as the sole obstacle, a disgruntled heir sitting on a useless plot of land out of spite. The writer, who was clearly on Gregory's payroll, twisted my $5 million counteroffer into an act of pure evil. But the worst part, the part that made me physically ill, was how they used my son. The article mentioned Leo by name. It spoke of his unfortunate but manageable heart condition, quoting an anonymous family source. I knew it had to be my mother or Ashley, who claimed I had refused a more than generous offer of $300,000 that would have easily covered his medical needs. One has to wonder, the article concluded, what kind of mother would gamble with her own child's life just to squeeze a few more dollars out of a community building project? I dropped my phone on the sofa as if it were on fire. They had made me a monster. They had taken the most sacred, painful part of my life and turned it into a weapon to shame me into submission. The comments section was a sewer of hatred. What a horrible woman. Someone should call Child Protective Services. I hope she loses everything. I started to hyperventilate, the room spinning around me. They were right. What was I doing? I had $300,000 on the table. It was safety. It was Leo's surgery. Why did I push for more? Who did I think I was, taking on a man like Gregory? The shame and fear were suffocating. I was about to pick up the phone to call Thomas and tell him to take the deal, to just make it all stop. But as I reached for it, my eyes landed on the old leather box on my bookshelf. My father's box. A wave of memory washed over me, so clear it was like he was in the room. I remembered being a little girl, sitting on the floor of his workshop while he built a detailed architectural model. I had asked him why he spent so much time on the hidden parts underneath, the bits no one would ever see. He had smiled and tapped the base of the model. "A foundation looks like nothing," he'd told me, his voice calm and steady, "until you build a skyscraper on it." The words echoed in my head, cutting through the panic. This was the ugly part. This was the digging in the dirt, the pouring of concrete, the part where everything was a mess and nothing looked like it would ever be whole. Gregory and my mother thought they were tearing me down. They didn't realize they were just giving me more materials to build with. I picked up the phone and dialed Thomas. "He wants to play dirty?" I said, my voice no longer shaking but ringing with cold clarity. "Fine, let's get dirty." "Good," was all Thomas said on the other end of the line. His voice was calm, but I could hear an underlying current of satisfaction. "I was hoping you'd say that. Bullies like Gregory only understand one language: leverage. His smear campaign was an attempt to take yours away. We're about to show him you have more than he could possibly imagine." I took a deep breath. the horrible comments from the article still burning in my mind. What do? We stop playing defense, he said. We go on the attack. He's built his entire public image around being a community champion, a visionary. We're going to find out what's underneath that shiny exterior. I'm going to hire a private investigator, one of the best. He's discreet and he's relentless. We'll look into every permit Gregory has ever filed, every company he's ever owned, every partner he's ever had. My mind was racing. This was real. This was happening. What do you want me to do? I asked. I can't just sit here. I know, Thomas replied, and I don't want you to. Your father was an architect, right? A planner. He must have kept records, blueprints, old files. I want you to go through everything of his that you have. Every box, every folder. Gregory thinks he's dealing with a piece of dirt. We need to find out exactly what your father knew about that land. After I hung up, I felt a surge of purpose I hadn't felt in years. For so long, my life had been about reacting to Leo's diagnosis, to my mother's cruelty, to my own financial struggles. Now I was taking action. I put Leo down for his nap and went straight to the hall closet where I kept the 2 cardboard boxes of my father's things that my mother had grudgingly let me take after he passed. They were filled with old books, drafting tools, and rolled-up blueprints. As I untied the twine on one of the rolls, the familiar smell of old paper and graphite filled the air. It smelled like my childhood. I spent the entire afternoon on the floor of my living room, surrounded by my father's life's work. Most of it was plans for houses and small commercial buildings he had designed. But in the bottom of the second box, I found a thick, leather-bound binder. The label on the spine was faded, but I could just make out the words, Willow Creek Property. My heart started beating faster. That was the name of the area where my land was located. I opened the binder. Inside were dozens of pages of handwritten notes, geological surveys, water table measurements, and environmental impact studies my father had commissioned himself over 20 years ago. He had been meticulous. He had documented every species of plant, every type of soil, every seasonal change on that small plot of land. I didn't understand most of the technical data, but I kept reading. Tucked into a plastic sleeve in the back was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It was a letter from the County Planning Commission, dated 1998. It was a rejection letter. Someone, the name was redacted, had applied to have the area rezoned for heavy commercial development. The application had been denied. The reason for denial was a single sentence, circled in red ink by my father. The land has been designated a protected habitat for the monarch butterfly migration route, a federally recognized environmental sanctuary. I read the sentence 3 times. A protected habitat. A sanctuary. Gregory wasn't planning to build a golf resort. You can't build a golf course on a federally protected monarch butterfly sanctuary. He was planning to destroy it. He was either counting on no one knowing, or he had a plan to bypass the law. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The lowball offer of $20,000, the aggressive tactics, the public smear campaign. He wasn't trying to negotiate a fair price. He was trying to scare me into selling him the key to an illegal operation before I realized what I was holding. He wasn't just a bully. He was a criminal in the making. I looked at the pages spread around me, my father's careful work, his quiet diligence. He had left me more than just a piece of land. I remembered him in his workshop, his brow furrowed in concentration. A foundation looks like nothing, he'd said, tapping the base of one of his models, until you build a skyscraper on it. My father hadn't just given me the foundation, he had given me the blueprints. My hands were trembling as I picked up my phone to call Thomas. I think I found something, I said, my voice shaking with the magnitude of my discovery. I think I know why he's so desperate. I explained about the binder, the surveys, and the letter from the Planning Commission. I could hear the sound of him typing furiously on his keyboard. Laura, stay right where you are. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way over, he said, his voice charged with an electric energy. I think you just found the whole game. While I waited, I got a text message. It was from Ashley. It was a picture of her at a bridal shop, posing in a wedding dress that looked like it was made of spun diamonds. She was smiling, a radiant, carefree smile. The text underneath read, "Just had my final fitting. Only 3 weeks to go. Heard about your little article. Maybe you should take the money before you end up with nothing. Just trying to help. XO." I stared at the picture, at her perfect, happy life, built on the foundation of my son's suffering. The rage that had been simmering inside me for months turned into something cold and hard. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Thomas with a single line. "Add this to the file." The skyscraper was going up, and my sister and my mother were about to find out what it was like to live in the shadow it cast. When Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, he found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by the scattered contents of my father's life. He didn't say a word at first, just knelt beside me and picked up the yellowed letter from the County Planning Commission. He read it once, then a second time, his lips moving silently. A slow, sharp exhale was the only sound in the room. "A federally recognized environmental sanctuary," he said, his voice a low whistle. "Laura, do you have any idea what this is?" "I think so," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's everything." "It's more than everything," he corrected, his eyes lit with a fire I hadn't seen before. "This isn't just leverage. This is a kill shot. He's not planning a golf resort. He's planning to commit multiple federal crimes: conspiracy, destruction of protected habitat, wire fraud for using interstate communications to do it. We're talking about millions in fines and serious prison time." He stood up and started pacing my small living room, running a hand through his hair. "This explains the aggression, the smear campaign. He thought you were just some single mom he could bully into taking a few $100,000. He never in a million years imagined you had this. He thinks he's trying to acquire a property. What he's actually doing is trying to acquire the evidence of his future crimes." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression serious. "We have to be smart about this, Laura. Smarter than we've ever been. My first instinct is to call the Environmental Protection Agency, the FBI, the press. But we can't." "Why not?" I asked, confused. "He's a criminal." "He's a rich and connected criminal," Thomas clarified. "If we go public now, he'll lawyer up, bury this in court for years, bribe whoever he needs to bribe. He'll paint this as a clerical error, a misunderstanding about outdated zoning laws. He might even get away with it. No. We can't give him time to prepare. The attack has to be sudden, and it has to be total." He pulled out his phone. "My private investigator has been digging into him for the past 3 days. I got an email an hour ago. It seems our Mr. Gregory has a history. 5 years ago, in a small town in Arizona, he wanted to build a luxury housing development on land that was zoned for agricultural use. The local zoning board chairman mysteriously came into a lot of money right before the vote to rezone. The project went through. It was a pattern. He didn't follow rules. He broke them and paid people to look the other way." "So what do we do?" I asked, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of clarity. "We let him think he's winning," Thomas said, a grim smile touching his lips. "We let him think his smear campaign is working. We let him think you're scared and desperate. And then we set a meeting. Just you, me, and him. No one else." "A meeting? What do we say?" "Very little," he replied. "We don't show him this letter. We don't mention the words monarch butterfly. We just show him one thing." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file. "The investigator also found this. It's a copy of the geological survey Gregory's company filed with their preliminary proposal. It's a fake, a complete fabrication. It conveniently omits all the data your father collected. And the geologist who signed off on it? He doesn't exist. The signature is a forgery." My father's meticulous work, his years of quiet study, was the truth. Gregory's empire was built on a lie. I looked down at the blueprints and notes spread across my floor. My father's calm voice echoed in my mind, as clear as if he were standing right there. "A foundation looks like nothing," he had said, "until you build a skyscraper on it." Gregory had built his skyscraper on sand, on a fake foundation. My father had left me one made of solid rock. "So we confront him with the fake survey," I said, understanding dawning. Exactly. We show him we know he's a fraud. We don't tell him how much we know. We just let his imagination do the work. We let him wonder what else we have. He'll panic. And a man like that, when he panics, he gets even sloppier. He'll try to cover his tracks. He'll call the people he bribed. He'll move money. And when he does, Thomas said, his eyes gleaming, we'll be watching. He was right. This was the only way. It wasn't just about getting the money for Leo's surgery anymore. It was about tearing down a man who thought he was above the law, a man who would destroy a sanctuary for profit. It was for my father's memory. And it was for my mother and my sister, who would soon learn what it felt like to be on the wrong side of power. Set the meeting, I said, my voice steady. The ground floor of my skyscraper was complete. It was time to start building the first few floors. And from that high up, I knew the view of their downfall would be spectacular. The call to Gregory's office was made from my living room, with the contents of my father's binder spread out on the coffee table like a battle plan. I listened on speakerphone as Thomas navigated the polite but firm fortress of a high-powered executive's schedule. He didn't sound like a small-town lawyer anymore. His voice was crisp, efficient, and held a note of authority that made even me sit up a little straighter. "Mr. Gregory's assistant, please," he said. After a brief hold, a woman's voice came on the line. "This is Thomas, counsel for Laura. My client is prepared to discuss Mr. Gregory's final offer regarding the Willow Creek property. She's requested a meeting in person." There was a pause. I could almost hear the assistant's surprise. They had been expecting a surrender by phone, not a request for a face-to-face meeting. "Mr. Gregory is very busy," the assistant said coolly. "I'm sure he is," Thomas replied, his tone unchanging. "However, given the public nature of this negotiation, my client feels it's best to conclude this matter directly. We are available tomorrow at 10 a.m. at his office." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. He was using Gregory's own tactics against him. Another pause, longer this time. I heard muffled speaking in the background. The assistant came back on the line, her voice now slightly more accommodating. "Mr. Gregory can make time for you. 10 a.m. tomorrow." After he hung up, a heavy silence filled the room. The meeting was set. In less than 24 hours, I would be in the same room as the man who was trying to ruin my life. "He took the bait," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course he did," Thomas said, gathering his papers. "He thinks you're broken. He thinks you crawled back, ready to sign whatever he puts in front of you for the 300,000. He'll be sitting there tomorrow morning feeling like a king, ready to watch you beg. Let him." The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I tried to play with Leo, to read him stories, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I looked at his sweet, trusting face, a fresh wave of determination washed over me. This wasn't just about land or money anymore. It was about his future. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother, Carol. I almost didn't answer, but I knew ignoring her would only lead to a dozen more calls. "I'm glad you came to your senses," she said without any preamble. "Ashley told me you're meeting with that man tomorrow. For once in your life, Laura, don't mess this up. Take the money. We can finally put all this ugliness behind us." "The ugliness you helped create?" I asked, my voice cold. She sighed, a long-suffering sound she had perfected over years. "I don't have time for your theatrics. Just think about your son, and think about your sister. Her wedding is supposed to be a happy time for this family." "I am thinking about my son," I said, and for the first time, I felt no anger toward her, only a distant pity. She was so blinded by Ashley's sparkling, hollow world that she couldn't see the truth right in front of her. "I have to go, Carol." I hung up before she could reply. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not in a power suit I couldn't afford, but in a simple dark blue dress and the small silver locket my father had given me for my 16th birthday. It felt like armor. Thomas picked me up at 9:30. He was wearing his best suit, and he carried a single, slim leather briefcase. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I nodded, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Just remember," he said as we drove downtown, "we are in complete control. He doesn't know it yet, but he walked into our trap the moment he agreed to this meeting. We present the fake survey. That's it. No emotion, no accusations. We just slide it across the table and wait. Let the silence do the work. Gregory's office was on the top floor of the tallest skyscraper in the city. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, designed to make you feel small and insignificant. As we rode the silent, high-speed elevator, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. I looked out the glass wall of the elevator as the city spread out below us, a complex model of interconnected lives and buildings. My father would have loved this view. The elevator doors opened onto a plush, silent reception area. A woman with a headset smiled a practiced, empty smile. "Mr. Gregory is expecting you," she said, her voice a soft purr. She led us down a long hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my apartment building. She stopped at a pair of massive oak doors. "You can go right in," she said, and then retreated, her heels sinking silently into the thick carpet. Thomas looked at me and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He put his hand on one of the heavy doors. This was it. The skyscraper was about to get a new floor, one built on a foundation of truth. And from the top, I knew I'd be able to see everything. He pushed the door open, and we walked inside. Gregory's office was less a room and more a statement. It was a vast expanse of dark wood, chrome, and glass, with a panoramic view of the city that made the world outside look like a toy set. He wasn't sitting behind his massive desk when we entered. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette against the morning sun, holding a glass of what looked like whiskey. He turned slowly, a predator assessing new arrivals in his territory. A smile played on his lips, but it didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Laura," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "And this must be the famous Thomas. Please have a seat, though I doubt this will take long." He gestured to two small, uncomfortable-looking chairs that were dwarfed by his enormous desk. It was a classic power play, making us look up at him. We sat. He remained standing, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I have to admit I was surprised you requested this meeting," he continued, taking a slow sip. "I assumed after the little article in the paper you'd be calling, begging me to take the property off your hands. Things can get so messy. Reputations are fragile." He was enjoying this, savoring his perceived victory. "I'm a generous man, Laura. I understand you're in a difficult position. A single mother, a sick child. It pulls at the heartstrings. So, against my better judgment, my offer of $300,000 still stands. Sign the papers today, and you can walk out of here with a check and put this all behind you." He finally moved to his desk, placing the glass down with a soft click. He slid a thick contract across the polished surface. "It's all there. Standard agreement." I glanced at Thomas. His face was a mask of professional calm. He didn't even look at the contract. Instead, he reached into his slim briefcase and took out a single sheet of paper. It looked insignificant on the vast expanse of that desk. He slid it across the wood, stopping it right next to Gregory's contract. "We've come with a counter-proposal," Thomas said, his voice even and quiet. Gregory chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "A counter-proposal? How ambitious." He picked up the paper, his smile still in place. I watched his eyes scan the page. I saw the exact moment the smile faltered. It was a subtle shift, a tightening around his mouth. His eyes flicked back to the top of the page, then to the bottom, where a forged signature sat below a list of falsified data. He looked up, his expression no longer smug, but sharp and questioning. "What is this?" he asked, his voice losing its smooth edge. "It's a copy of the geological survey your firm filed with the county for the Willow Creek development," Thomas said calmly. "The one signed by Dr. Albert Finch. We found it very interesting, especially since, according to the state licensing board, no geologist by that name has ever existed." The silence that followed was deafening. The air in the room grew thick, heavy. Gregory stared at the paper as if it were a snake. The color had drained from his face, leaving behind a pale, waxy sheen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was a man who was used to controlling every room he entered, and for the first time, he had lost control. His mind was visibly racing, trying to calculate what we knew, how we knew it, and what other cards we were holding. "This is a forgery," he finally stammered, trying to regain his footing. "You're trying to blackmail me." "We're just pointing out a discrepancy," Thomas replied, his voice still maddeningly calm. "A rather significant one. A federal offense, in fact. It makes one wonder what other discrepancies we might find if we started looking closer. Say, at certain zoning board votes in Arizona 5 years ago." Gregory's composure shattered. He slammed his hand on the desk, the force of it making his whiskey glass jump. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he snarled, his face contorting with rage. "I will bury you, you and your son. I will drag your name through so much mud you'll never work in this town again." I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time, I felt nothing but contempt. His threats were the desperate roars of a cornered animal. I thought of my father's words then, as clear as day. "A foundation looks like nothing," he used to say, "until you build a skyscraper on it." Gregory's entire empire, his skyscraper of wealth and power, was built on a foundation of lies and forgeries. And we had just kicked out the cornerstone. Thomas stood up, and I followed his lead. He pushed the chair back in neatly. "Our offer is this," he said, his voice now crisp and cold as ice. $20 million, wired to a trust for Leo's medical care within 24 hours. In exchange, you get this. He tapped the fake survey. "And our silence." $20 million? Gregory choked out, a strangled laugh escaping his lips. "You're insane." "Am I?" Thomas asked. "Or am I offering you a bargain? Because my other option is to walk out of this office and place a call to the Environmental Protection Agency. I wonder what they'd think about a man trying to illegally build a golf course on a federally protected monarch butterfly sanctuary." The last bit of color drained from Gregory's face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. The word sanctuary hit him like a physical blow. He slumped into his chair, the fight gone out of him. He knew. He knew we had him. We turned and walked toward the massive oak doors. We didn't look back. As Thomas's hand touched the handle, I paused. I turned my head slightly. "My father taught me to build things on a solid foundation, Mr. Gregory," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. "You should have done the same." We walked out, closing the doors softly behind us, leaving him alone in his glass tower, with the ruins of his foundation crumbling all around him. The elevator ride down was silent. Thomas and I didn't speak. We didn't need to. I stared at my reflection in the polished steel doors, seeing not a desperate single mother but a woman who had just faced down a giant and hadn't blinked. The air between us wasn't tense anymore. It was light, filled with the unspoken energy of a battle won. When the doors opened to the marble lobby, the world seemed brighter, the sounds of the city less like noise and more like a symphony. We walked out into the sunshine, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. "He'll pay," Thomas said, his voice calm and certain as he hailed a cab. "Men like him always pay when their only other option is a prison cell." The next 24 hours were a unique form of torture. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap into my throat. I watched Leo sleep, his small chest rising and falling, and I prayed. I prayed to my father, to whatever forces were out there, that our plan had worked. I tried to distract myself by organizing my dad's notes, carefully placing each page back into the binder. It felt like putting a weapon away after a war. The following morning at 10:15, my phone rang. It was Thomas. I answered on the first ring, my hand shaking. "Good morning, Laura," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm just calling to confirm that a wire transfer of $20 million has been deposited into the trust account for Leo." I sank onto my sofa, the phone still pressed to my ear. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of pure, overwhelming relief. We had done it. My father's legacy hadn't just saved a piece of land, it had saved my son. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I answered. It was Ashley, and she was sobbing hysterically. "He called it off, Laura," she wailed. "Arthur called off the wedding. He said his father won't pay for it anymore. He said Gregory is facing financial ruin and that our family is toxic. I listened, my heart a cold, steady stone in my chest. The silence on my end of the line seemed to make her even more frantic. "You did this!" she shrieked. "Whatever you did to Mr. Gregory, you ruined my life!" Then, my mother's voice came on the phone, sharp and furious. "Laura, you listen to me," Carol snapped. "You have that money now. You owe it to your sister to fix this. You will pay for her wedding. You will make this right." I took a deep breath. The old fear, the old need for their approval, was gone. It had been burned away in the fire of the last few weeks. "No," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "I won't. You both made your choice. You chose a rich man's empty promises over your own family. You stood by and watched while he tried to destroy me and my son. The money Gregory lost wasn't his to give Arthur's family in the first place. It was built on lies." I could hear their shocked silence. They had never heard me speak this way. "You wanted the benefits of his skyscraper," I continued, "but you didn't care that it was built on a foundation of sand. Now it's collapsing, and you're surprised you're getting buried in the rubble. You're on your own." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel anger or even satisfaction. I just felt free. That afternoon, I sat with Leo on the floor of our living room, the sunlight streaming through the window. My father's binder was on the coffee table. I had called the children's hospital and scheduled the consultation for Leo's surgery. Everything was in motion. I ran my hand over the worn leather of the binder. My father had left me more than just land or evidence. He had left me a blueprint for how to live. I finally understood what he meant all those years ago. "A foundation looks like nothing," I whispered to myself, watching Leo build a tower of colorful blocks, "until you build a skyscraper on it." He had given me a foundation of truth, integrity, and love. And on it, I was finally building a future for my son, a skyscraper of our own, tall enough to touch the sky. And from the top, the view was beautiful. From a sterile doctor's office to a foundation of truth. I've scheduled Leo's surgery and am building our future. What did you think of my mother's choice? Subscribe for more intense stories.